Well, I really stepped in it. See, on a previous video, we did some water bath technique pickled blue eggs. And I made the mistake of calling it water bath canning. And some of my more experienced canners out there's heads smooth exploded. First off, I am so sorry. You're right. That wasn't technically a water bath canning process. And I did a revision video right after that explaining that, yes, I used the wrong terminology and promised that I would do a proper video of water bath canning. So today's the day, y'all. We're going to get it straight here. No less of you than 6 immediately contacted me and asked me when. So today's the when. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? So I guess the first thing you need to know before we go any further with any of this is, what do you need in order to do a proper water bath canning technique? So let's take a look at that. The first thing you're going to need are a few tools. Another thing I did in the last video was I used a metal tool. Yeah, that's bad, because if you do that, you can potentially chip the glass. Ding, ding. It's not a good thing. So this actually, it gives you your depths for the water and your filling. Excuse me, I'm still learning to use this new phone camera. Trying to get the... Yeah, that's not working. Hang on. That's better. So you can see the different digits, and it would help if it's right side up. There you go. You can see the different ones. This is plastic, guys, so you won't actually chip your things. This is also used to get the air bubbles out of the jars. Remember we did that? This is that grabber thing. Please don't try to do like I did when I first started and use a pair of pliers. You will definitely hurt yourself or the jar. And yeah, that is unfortunate experience talking. Other things you're going to need. This is a funnel. This keeps, when you pour the liquids in, the juice from getting on the outside of the jar as much. And of course, you're going to need rings. And if you'll remember our mistake last time, make sure your lids are good, clean, smooth. These are brand spanking new out of the box. They've never been used. We're going to do apples today. So you're, of course, going to need your apples. And you're going to need the tools to cut those apples up. You're going to cut them up into wedges. And we're going to take the centers out. And then a straining spoon is going to be very useful as well. All right. We'll get to ingredients. Your water bath canner. Don't forget, it needs to be a nice sized one with a good lid. And your jars. We're going to use these smaller jars today. Right there. And we're going to, and I'll show you how to measure the water and stuff. And we're going to actually go ahead and get those started now while I'm doing other things, so that they can go ahead and start being sterilized for this whole process. You're going to need another pot to cook your sauce in. And, you know, you got to keep the water level over, I'll explain it here in a few minutes, a certain limit. So it's a good idea to go ahead and just have some extra water going, so that if the level in this container gets down too much, you can immediately add more boiling water into it without reducing your heat any. That's what you want to avoid. All right, now that's pots, pans. Don't forget in there the spacer rack on the bottom. That's very, very important. That keeps the air bubbles from rattling your jars and potentially breaking something or creating more air or breaking your seal. On to ingredients. Apples. Yes, we already said that. Now, syrups. You are supposed to use 3/4 cup syrup. You can create your own syrup by using sugar, or you can just use pure corn syrup. But if you want to substitute in something like sugar or molasses for a little bit different flavor, you can take and use up to half of the 3/4 cups in honey or other sweeteners. They don't recommend using Splenda and stuff as much, but you can definitely check the website that I'm going to put on the screen. This is a federally recognized website and the absolute safest place to get your final information from. So if you catch me on something I say wrong, refer to this website and I will definitely post a retraction and explain the difference so that other people can grow and learn along with us. In this case, for spiced apples, which is what we're going to make today, I am using a 1/4 cup of honey, 2 teaspoons of molasses, and then I just top the rest off with the corn syrup. So I'm using less than half of it in honey and molasses and the rest is corn syrup. And then there's your spices. It wouldn't be much of a spiced apple recipe without spices. And again, you can refer to the website to make sure that what you're using is safe. In a lot of ways, I'm actually using the apple butter recipe off of this and just stealing the spices off of that in my own proportions. I've got 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. You're going to need some lemon. Basically, this is to soak the apples in and toss them in so that they don't brown before you can actually get them in the jars and get them finally prepped and ready. So now let's get our apples cut up and ready to go into the sauce. I'd like to start off by making sure I've got the right amount of water in my canner before I actually fill anything or get everything boiled. So I wanted to show you how I do that real quick. To start with, you want to make sure that there is at least 1 to 2 inches of water above the top of your jars. So I always just put my jars preemptively in there, carry it over to the sink, fill each jar. I take my trusty little measurement tool, which you'll see has measurements on, and if I can get it to focus, there you go. So the top notch right up at the very end there is 1 inch. We want between that and about twice as much. So I just stick this in here to the top of the jar and look at it. And yes, we're definitely deeper than 1 inch, and it looks like we're at right around 2. Now once this boils, you'll see that the water level actually goes down. So you want it just a little bit above that minimum. So remember, always 1 to 2 inches above the top of the jar. So we're going to go ahead, get this on the stove, get it boiling, and then I'm going to take my jars out. And that way I know my jars are actually sterile. So it's a great way to not only measure, but prepare your jars to be filled and keep them sterile and keep the germs to a 0 level. Thing I want to do is make sure that my lids are also getting sanitized. So let's go ahead and just drop those into the water here. The water's still cold, and spread them around so that the water gets all the way around those. And we'll just use a pair of tongs to pull those out. But that way I know that those lids, even though they're brand new, that way I know that those lids are sanitized. Perfect. Once you've got a good rolling boil and your jar is in there, just set your timer for 5 minutes and go ahead and start it. And when that goes off, you can pull the jars out. I'll show you how to do that safely in 5 minutes. Beautiful apple. Let's cut this apple. I've always wanted to do that. Now, for the rest of them. Boom. Apples. Ta-da! So, now we've got all our apples cut up. You'll notice that our apples are in this liquid. What this is lemon juice water. Remember that lemon juice that we had over there? Now it's in the bowl. We've got all that, and we just covered our apples in the lemon juice. Now we're going to let those just soak until we're ready to use them, and then we're going to strain them and mix them with our 6½ cups of water and all our syrups. If you've got backyard chickens, then you definitely want to reuse these scraps. These are great, so take the cores and toss them aside. You don't need those. The chickens don't need them either. In fact, the seeds, these little things right here, can actually be extremely dangerous for your chickens. They have a very minute amount of cyanide in them. Yeah, cyanide. That's what I said. So, pull the cores out, and the rest will make great chicken treats. Chickens know what's up. They know what's up. Are y'all ready? Y'all ready? Love 'em apple peels. Gotta love it. What you think, guys? That good? Yay! All right, back to apples. And just in time. Timer off. Still a good rolling boil. Let's get that lid out of the way. Go ahead and kill this for now. And this is where I said I'd show you how to use these. Let's see if I can not burn myself doing this. All right, so the trick is to get the jars below the rim where the actual stuff goes. Now, you don't normally want to tip jars, but we're just, remember, getting these out because they were sanitized, and that's how you do it. And then you just set that jar on your cooling pad or your rack or whatever it is you've got. For the lids, just use a pair of tongs. Reach in, grab your lid. So yeah, this could be a little bit like fishing. And you can get those out and you never have to touch them. Just like that. Now you don't want your water in your water bath canner to get too awfully cold. You want it to stay hot because it needs to be boiling again to actually water bath them later. So remember, keep the water boiling in the smaller pot so that you've got water to actually top it off with if your water level gets a little too low. As soon as you turn the water off to pull the jars out from being sterilized, you're going to want to immediately go ahead and start boiling the water for your sauce. That's 6.5 cups of water. We want to get it to a slow boil. We'll come back when we've got that ready too. Okay, in regards to the sauce, I always add just a little bit of extra water before I actually start the water to boiling because I know I'm going to lose some water in the boiling process. So I've now got my 6.5 cups of water with just a little over, making it probably closer to 6 and say 3/4. That water is boiling good, and it's time to go ahead and now add my syrup. So I'm going to add all my syrup to the water. As you're putting your syrup in there, stir it in really good. Once your syrup is stirred in, it'll dissolve all the way into that water and make that syrup water. Next, we go ahead and add our spices. Be sure to whisk that in really good as well. Alright, I'm going to let that sit for a few minutes and come back to boil and strain my apples. And then about the time that hits a boil, I put my apples in. See you in a minute. Don't forget to return the lid to the pot to bring it back to a boil. It just goes faster. Alright, our water is boiling. Yeah, so now we dump the apples in. And instead of using that whisk that just hit the floor, now use our nice little slotted spurtle spoon. If you don't have a spurtle spoon, it's fine. You just put this back in. You can see we've just got a nice slow rolling boil. So we're going to boil these in this beautiful water. It's nice spicy. You can see some of the spices already sticking to them for 5 minutes. So now heads up on this. The apples cooled the water down. You've got to let it get back to boiling before you actually start your timer. Okay, lid back on. A couple of tips about the apples. When you're soaking the apples in the lemon juice, you notice I left the apples in the lemon juice all the way up until I was ready to actually dump them in the sauce. I like my apples a little bit tart. and this will definitely get them there. If you like your apples a little less tart, pull them from the water sooner. Go ahead and strain them in the sink while you're waiting to actually dump them in the sauce. Another thing, once you do finally get your sauce back up to a boil, that's what I'm still waiting on here, then you'll want to make sure to stir your apples frequently during the 5 minutes that they're cooking. About the time you start your timer for your apples, you're going to want to start your water boiling again for your water canning process itself. That way it's good and ready and already boiling by the time you've got your jars filled, which will be our next step. Okay, our apples are done and in the bowl and ready to go in the jars. So let's see if I can do this. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to take our trusty little thing here and our little funnel. I'm going to put the funnel in the jar, scoop out the apples, and just fill our jars. You want to leave about a 1/4 inch from the top or so, just kind of right at the line, right about here. So we're almost there. We can get a couple more in there. Now the funnel not only helps ensure that I get the apples in there without making a big mess, but it also helps to make sure that I'm not getting a bunch of juice on the outside rim of my jar. I'm going to be wiping these jars down once I'm done filling them to make sure that that doesn't happen anyway, and I'll show you that as well. It's kind of part of the process. Don't worry about them being super packed tight. Just kind of want to get them in there. So we'll get these filled. I'll come right back. Unfortunately, I only had enough apples for 3 jars. But that's okay. The same principle applies. I'll just fill the other jars with water when I put them in so that I've still got my balance of 5 jars in the canner. Remember, you always want 5 jars in the canner. So our next step is going to be to put the juice from the broth in with the apples. So again, pull out your thing. I like to use a 1 cup measuring cup for this. Scoop out your juice and just fill them up. And again, you want to go just to that top there. And this is where the measuring part comes in. So first go in all around your jar. Get all those nasty air bubbles out of there. Probably going to have to put some more liquid in there after you do this part. Again, plastic. A little bit more in this one. And if I check, I'm going to be right at a 1/2 inch from the top there, which is perfect. That's just what we want. So let's do this for the other 4 jars, the other 2 jars. The other 2 jars, I'm just going to fill with the broth that's left over, because that's good, sweet apple juice. And there's nothing wrong with a little bit of apple cider later. You've got to take a damp rag first, gently wipe the edges. This is very important. If you don't do this, they might not seal. So, gently wiping the edges with a damp, sterile, clean rag. Very important. Now I put those lids on. I gotta wipe them down too because I don't want anything on them. There's one. Okay, now very loosely put your lids on. Once you've got your lids on loosely, the very next thing you want to do is immediately get them in that boiling water. This is where this comes in. When you grab these, you grab them below that rim. It's very important. So I'm going to carry this over, put them in the water bath. Be sure not to tip this, while you're carrying it, leave it upright at all times. So in order to do this properly, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. Okay, that is perfect. So we've got our jars in there. They've got about 2 inches of water above them. We're putting our lid on. And now we process. I'm at altitude. I'm at an altitude of 928 feet. So, according to my chart, I need to process for 20 minutes. Now, I don't start that until it's already boiling again, which is, it's pretty much there already. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit start. 20 minutes to process. minutes. It's 20 minutes of my life that I'll never get back. Worth it! You know, we talked about if you have too little of the water and if you need to top it off. But if you get your jars in there and realize you have way too much over the top, don't be afraid to siphon it off and just put it aside in case you have to add it back later. This way you don't have overflow while you're boiling your water. While we're waiting under this to boil, I wanted to show you one other option that I sometimes like to put in with the spiced apples. You can actually add whole things to canned goods as well. These are just cloves and cinnamon sticks. Another thing I could have done was put a single cinnamon stick and 4 cloves in each of the jars. This would have really upped the clove and cinnamon flavor in the apple. But I wanted to keep it simple for you. But just don't forget, if you really up the spice, go ahead and add those fresh ingredients. That's exactly what we want to see. A nice, steady, rolling boil. You don't want your boil to be too hard because then it will jostle the jars around in there and you could break your seal or chip your glass. So a nice, steady, rolling boil. Not too soft, not too hard. Nice, steady. Dog, it's done. So here we go. Now let's start by turning our timer off, taking our lid off, timer off, turn our water off and our lid, and reach in with our tongs, switch this, nice boil, reach in below the rim, very carefully keeping it upright at all times. Yes, you're gonna drip. And place it on your cooling rack. Looks good so far. Let me get the rest of them out and I'll take a picture of what they look like all on the rack. And then they need to sit for about 24 hours. Okay, beautiful. What's funny is you can already hear a couple of them starting to pop. Now you don't want to put any weight. Do not press down on these. But if you want, you're going to have some water on the top. Just very gently, like not even more than the weight of the towel. Hear them popping already? That's wonderful. We're just going to get some of that excess water off the top there. Fabulous. All right, 3 cans of spiced cinnamon apples and 2 cans of apple cider, ready to store for months and months and months. Look beautiful. We're gonna let them sit on the counter, like I said, for 24 to 48 hours before I actually put them in the pantry and before we can eat them. And that's it, guys. It's just that easy. Water bathing technique for canning. Water bath canning is a lot of fun. It's really simple
anybody can do it if you have the right supplies. So don't feel like you've got to stick with what I did. Be sure to check out that website. I'm going to post it up real quick, and I'll be sure to put the link down in the description of the video so that you can go back and refer to it at all times. This is just the safest, easiest method as they recommend. I just highly recommend, especially if you're new, that you don't go too far looking at too many other videos. Be sure to check with their website. Make sure what you're doing is safe. If you don't do it right, you can really make yourself sick or somebody else. So, like I said, lots of fun when you know what you're doing. Hope this was a great introduction video for you. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Y'all, I'm really trying to build some subscribers right now. Share this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe down at the bottom. Give me a thumbs up like. If you give me a thumbs up down, tell me why. Thanks for your time. Bye, y'all.